So this video focuses on finding the inverse of a function. I have another one out there that speaks more on logs and exponents, but this particular one will be finding the inverse of a linear function, powers, radicals, and rational type functions. So here we go. The steps are shown here. The first 4 steps are listed, and you're going to change your f of x to y, sorry. Sometimes it's not shown as f of x. It could be g of x. It could be g of n. It still applies. You're going to change that to y, because I would just stick with x and y, even if it has another variable. So what that will entail is, like I said, this actually represents y naturally, but I want to switch it to x, and then I want to go to my x and I want to switch that to y. So that's going to be my next step. And then the whole purpose is for us to solve for y. After we solve for y, we're going to rewrite that as f inverse of x. So you've probably seen this before, and you probably thought it was referred to as f to the power of -1, but it is not. It is, again, read as f inverse of x. I used to say f of x, the inverse of f of x. I know what it, I mean, it's the same difference to me. So f inverse of x, we'll just use proper terminology here. So let's go ahead and attempt to do this first problem that's shown here using those steps that I just spoke about. So my f of x will become y. Well, until you get used to it, then you'll go ahead and just change that to x. That is y. So I'm just going to rewrite this as -2 over x minus 1 minus 2. So again, at some point, you will just eventually skip this step because you already know that f of x is y. So go ahead and rewrite my x, switch my x's and my y's. So this will now be x on the side by itself, -2 over, instead of x, I'm going to change that to a y, minus 1 minus 2. Now what I want to do is go ahead and start trying to solve for y per my directions. And when I'm doing that, I want to go ahead and get rid of my constant first. So I have to take the inverse, which is adding 2. That is going to allow me to cause that to go to 0. And that's what I'm trying to do right now so that I can get y by itself. I end up on this side with x plus 2 is equal to -2 over y minus 1. If you ever get to a point where you have your y in the denominator, what you want to do is on the opposite side, just make that a fraction as well, and then cross multiply. That's what I would suggest that you do. Now you have to be careful because what you see in the first fractions numerator is an expression. So go ahead and put that in parentheses, and where you see your y, that's also an expression. So put that in parentheses. That tells you to multiply the entire expression times the other expression. So 1 times -2 is -2 equals, and now I'm going to write what I just put parentheses around. Some of you are still struggling with distributing. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this first term, x. You have to multiply it times everything that's in the second set of parentheses. So what that will look like, I'm just going to bring the -2 down, will be x times y, which is xy. Then x times -1, which is -1x. You don't have to write the 1. Now you go to the second term and you do the exact same thing, 2 times y, and then 2 times -1. And now that's going to be plus 2y minus 2. What you want to do, because you're trying to get y by itself, so anything that has y, you want to keep it on this side. Anything that does not, you want to get rid of. So that would entail me doing the inverse of what's already shown. So I have a -x, I want to add x. I have a -2, I want to add 2. Again, I'm getting rid of what does not have a y. I'm trying to get y by itself. So I have to do the same thing on the opposite side. Positive x, positive 2. So when I do that, I notice that I am going to get rid of this on the left-hand side of the equal sign, the -2 and the positive 2 go away, leaving me with just x. And then I am setting this equal so that you don't get lost here, to x over y. I get rid of this one and I get rid of that, and I'm left with plus 2y. So now This is the fun part. Y'all love factoring. So we're going to factor out the greatest common factor, which is y. So look, once we take the y out, what that means is I'm literally dividing both terms by that y. What's left over? What's left over is x. Bring down that sign. What's left over is 2. Y is not by itself. What's stopping it from being by itself? This entire expression, x plus 2. So what I want to do is divide it so it'll go away. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So now y is by itself, but my directions ask me to rewrite it as f inverse of x. So that's what I'm going to do. And that becomes f inverse of x is equal to x over the quantity of x plus 2. That is how you find the inverse when your problem looks like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the other examples. So this example has a power in it. So we will take the inverse of that after we go through our steps of swapping the x's and the y's. So again, we already know that f of x means y. So we're just going to change that to x. Write everything down until you get to this x, and now you change it to y. You're swapping out your x's and your y's. And now your goal is to get y by itself. In order to get it by itself, I have to start moving things. So first, I want to move my constant. Since it is a positive 1, I want to go ahead and do the inverse, which is -1. What I do to one side, I do to the other. That is going to give me a 0 for the right-hand side. So I have x minus 1, and this is the 0 I was referring to. And I'm left with the quantity of y minus 2 raised to the 5th power. So in order to get rid of this power, I need to do the inverse. The inverse is the 5th root. And the whole purpose was to get rid of that. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. What I'm left with now is the 5th root of the quantity of x minus 1 is equal to y minus 2. Well, I'm trying to get y by itself. What's stopping it from being by itself? This -2. So now I have to change it to a +2. What I do to one side, I do to the other. I cannot combine those because the -1 is under the radical. So it is not a constant that I can combine with it. So now y is by itself. However, my directions ask me to rewrite it as f inverse of x. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I end up with f inverse of x is equal to the 5th root of the quantity of x minus 1. Do not put the +2 under the radical. It goes out to the side. That's the answer for that one. Example 2. I would like to go ahead and change. Now notice here, there's a g of x. It doesn't matter. G of x, f of x, h of x. It doesn't matter. That's still represented by y. So we want to change that to x. So let's do that. X is going to equal -2y minus 8 divided by 9. So on one side, you're going to have an x. On the other side, you're going to have a y. If you don't, that means you're doing something wrong. If you ever have a fraction set equal to a whole number or a whole variable, make that variable a fraction. That's what I do. How do you make something a fraction? Just put it over 1. Now I cross multiply. That's my method. And when I cross multiply, what I'm going to end up with is x times 9, which you write as 9x. You always put the number first, is equal to 1 times this entire expression, -2y minus 8. So 1 times anything is anything. And I'm trying to get y by itself. To do that, the first thing I want to do is get rid of this constant. The constant is the one that it's usually after the variable, but not all the time. It has a plus or a minus in front of it. And it's not directly next to the variable. See, this means multiplying. This one is like adding or subtracting, so plus or minus. So the actual inverse of that is going to be +8. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Notice I'm not combining the 8 and the 9 because the 8 does not have an x. So that's two separate things. And so I want to get rid of the 8, negative 8 on the opposite side. I'm left with 9x plus 8 is equal to negative 2y. And I see that y is still not by itself, so I'm going to have to divide it by negative 2 so that I can get y by itself. And I am going to rewrite this time as g inverse of x, because I started off with g of x, and I set it equal to 9x plus 8 over negative 2. That's the way I'm okay with it that way, but I have also seen it separated as two fractions. So 9 over, or negative 9 over 2x. And then if you were to simplify 8 minus divided by negative 2, I am just, okay, 8 divided by negative 2, then you're going to get negative 4. And I forgot to put my x back. All right, x minus 4. So either one of those answers is acceptable. It just depends on your teacher, so make sure that you ask. Okay, and let's go to example 3. Again, I want to swap out my x's and my y's. So this becomes x is equal to 4 over 3y plus 5 over 3. I want to get rid of my constant first. So that means I'm going to subtract both sides by 5 over 3. So that it goes away. That goes away, sorry. And then I'm left with x minus 5 over 3 is equal to 4 over 3y. Well, how do I get rid of that? You multiply both sides by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal? It means that you're going to flip this fraction. What's at the bottom in the denominator now becomes the numerator. What's in the numerator now becomes the denominator. That's the reciprocal. What you do to one side, you do to the other. However, this entire expression has to be multiplied times 3 over 4. Keep that in mind. That means you're going to have to add your own parentheses. The whole purpose of doing that is so that you could get rid of this 3, because diagonally, if they're exactly the same, you can get rid of it. You can get rid of this 4. And guess what? Y is by itself now. So now I have to simplify on the opposite side. 3 over 4 times x is simply 3 over 4x. Now, here, if you're aware of how fractions work, like I said a few minutes ago, if they look exactly the same diagonally, you can get rid of it. So now what's left over after I get rid of that is negative 5 over 4. Well, let's say that confused you. Then you would just take 3 multiplied times negative 5, which is negative 15, divided by 4 times 3, which is 12. Negative 15 divided by 12 would result in negative 5 over 4. So that's another way that you can do it. And now you just change your y to f. Is that what we start with? F? Yes. F inverse of x is equal to 3 over 4 x minus 5 over 4. That's my final answer. And then I have one more example, which is similar to the one we started off at the very beginning. I just felt like you might need more practice with it. We're going to change this to x. And this is 5 over y plus 3 plus 6. You always want to get rid of the one that has the plus or the minus. So that's your constant. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Negative 6, negative 6. So once I get rid of that, on this side, I have x minus 6 is equal to 5 over y plus 3. So again, I have a fraction set equal to an expression. So let's just make that expression a fraction by putting it over 1. And when I do that, cross multiply. Does not matter which side you start with. I want to start with the, actually, I'm going to start with the expression this time. So an expression is what I'm putting in parentheses right now. So I'm going to rewrite that as x minus 6, or the quantity of, times the quantity of y plus 3. And it's set equal to 1 times 5, which is 5. Now, what I want to do is what I said a few minutes ago. You take your first term and you multiply to everything that's in that second set of parentheses, which will leave me with x, y, and then x times 3 is positive 3x. You always write the number first and then the variable. Now go back and do the second term, including the sign. And you want to multiply it times everything that's in the second set of parentheses. So -6 times y is -6y. -6 times 3 is -18. Set this equal to 5. Anything that does not have a y in it, I want to get rid of it. So that is going to be this 3x. So the inverse is -3x. And this 18, the inverse is +18. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So here we go. I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm left with only terms that have an x in it. I mean a y. xy minus 6y is equal to, and I'm just going to rewrite this in standard form, -3x plus 23, 18 plus 5. Now what I want to do is factor out my greatest common factor, which is going to be y. If I move the correct information over. So I'm only going to have terms that I can take a y out of. And what I told you a few minutes ago, what that means is whatever I took out, that's what I'm dividing by. So what's left over, that's what you're going to put in your parentheses, x minus, and then here, once I take out the y, I'm left with a -6 equals -3x plus 23. And now what I want to do is get rid of what's stopping y from being by itself, which happens to be that x minus 6. Once I get rid of that, the y is by itself, as you can see. And so I just want to rewrite this as, I started with F or G? G. So I want to rewrite this as G inverse of x is equal to -3x plus 23 all over the quantity of x minus 6. So that should be enough to get you started. And again, like I said, I have another video that also talks about the inverses of exponents as well as logs. So if you need to look at that, feel free to search my channel, or I may just attach it here once I'm finished. Have an awesome day.